G'day everyone. Today we're going to be changing out the shoes on the drum brakes of this Toyota Hilux. We've already done the disc brakes and changed the pads on them on a separate video. So now it's time to look at the drums. We need to get the vehicle off the ground, get the wheel off, get the drum off, change out them shoes, adjust them to spec, and put it all back together. So let's get started. Okay, we've got a soft hammer here. Make sure it's a soft one. I'm just going to tap around the drum here just to loosen it off the center of that hub. It's a little bit rusted on and I just want to loosen it up. A lot of the drums will have a jacking or forcing screw thread on them, so you can jack them off with a bolt. This one had a hole, but there was no thread in it, so just give it a few taps around the outside. Don't need to hit it hard, just till it loosens off the center of that axle there, and we should be able to just pull it off. Of course, make sure that the parking brake is off, or you will never get it off. It'll be very tight until you release the park brake. Okay, when it comes to getting these shoes off, we have 3 springs we're going to remove, and then we're going to pull the shoes off on the outside, and we're going to basically just replace them with 2 new ones here, and we're going to back the adjuster off quite a bit because we're going to allow for our new shoes. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of degreaser because you don't really want to breathe in this dust. Brake cleaner is better, but I've got some degreaser here just to get rid of any of that dust. And we'll need a couple of pairs of pliers, and that's pretty much all we need to get this apart and back together again. The hardest part will be the handbrake cable, and I'll show you to do that as well. Okay, when it comes to disassembling the 2 shoes away from the backing plate of the drum, we of course have the 2 shoes there. We have a tensioner rod at the top, which is adjustable, and there's a big spring behind there. We have a spring at the bottom to hold the 2 shoes against that bottom bracket. We have a small spring that holds the auto tensioner against the gear that does the tensioning of the drum, and we have 2 clips that hold the drum shoes to the backing plate. Now them 2 clips I've just removed, and there's 2 pins that go through the backing plate. Those 2 there, remove those. Then we have to remove the bottom spring here that holds the 2 shoes together. That spring is quite tight and it does sit behind a bracket. We just need to make sure when we put it back together that it goes back behind that bracket again. And I'm going to leave the main spring at the top behind the tensioner rod. I'm going to leave that intact, and we're actually going to be able to lift both those shoes there up and past that wheel cylinder. The last thing here that I'm just about to undo is the parking brake cable. It is very, very tight. There's quite a heavy spring on it, and it takes quite a bit of work to just flick it past that section of the shoe. Now that section on the shoe there that moves, that pivot arm, that will come with the new shoe, so we can dispose of all of that as an assembly. We just have to remove that parking brake cable, and once we get it out of the way, we can lift it all past that wheel cylinder. Okay, the 2 shoes out, we have the adjuster out as well. We're going to clean these threads up, and we're going to hit them with a little bit of anti-seize so it's easy to adjust. We're also going to back it off quite a bit like I've already done there. So that sits between the 2 shoes. The shoes are different. One has the parking brake actuator on it, so we need to make sure that stays on this side. I need to back these pistons right back in. We'll put our new pads in there, reattach the parking brake and all the springs, get the drum on, and we'll adjust it up just to make sure we've got enough so we can activate the brakes immediately without them dragging on the drum. Okay, so that's all cleaned up now. We've got our new pad on this side, and we've got a new on this side as well. Make sure we've got them the right way around, and I've lubed this up with a little bit of grease and cleaned it up just to make sure it will adjust easily, and we're going to adjust it through that hole when we need to. So put all that back together. That's going to sit in here with the spring between it. Let's chuck these pads on. Okay, you can see here I've built the 2 shoes together. The parking brake shoe goes on the back, and I've fitted the tensioner rod and the spring already. I build that bit first, and then we slide it over past that wheel cylinder, and then we retract the wheel cylinder because these pistons do like to walk out. We'll retract that all the way in, and then we can fit the 2 shoes around the wheel cylinder. I find it easier to assemble that spring and that rod first, because once we get on the backing plate, it'd be very, very difficult to fit that spring and that rod on both of those shoes. It's much easier to build the assembly first to the point where I've got it. We don't go any further than this. We put them on loosely, and then we can fit the parking brake cable next. Okay, in order to get this parking brake on, I have loosened this side off. We're just going to grab this section of spring here with these little pliers between the end of the cable and the spring. I'm going to use these multi-grips here. I'm going to expose the cable because we need as much cable exposed as possible in order to get it over that section of the brake shoe. Seems like enough. Now we just need to pop it over there. Just like that. Now we just got to put this all back. Where it came from. Very much like that. Put this lower spring back on and this little one here. We'll get the drum back on there. Okay, well, the assembly of the two shoes is pretty much going to be the reverse of the disassembly. I'm going to put these two retaining clips on. You put the pins through the backing plate there, and then we put the retaining clips on. Make sure they're located and they're tight. I like to face them down usually as well, just to make sure they don't go anywhere. The orientation isn't that important and very unlikely they're going to move. Once we've got those two on and we're happy that they're secure, there is a little auto tensioner here. The idea is that this sits against the gear and it should keep the tension on the brakes as we increase our stroke as they wear, and it also stops that gear turning backwards. That sits underneath the tension bar, and it sits on a little dowel there with a spring, which I'm about to put on. And there it is there. That spring is now on. You may notice here I haven't got the parking brake on. I put it all together and realized putting the parking brake on is way easier when it's apart. So I'm actually showing you in the video to put the parking brake on first, but in this particular image here, I actually don't have the parking brake cable on. And we're just going to put this spring on at the bottom here. That goes behind the bracket. It's a fairly heavy spring, but it does sit behind that bracket. Just make sure that it's not sitting on the outside. It needs to go behind. So this is the whole unit fully built. This is actually the other side. I've got the auto tensioner there. That doesn't ever really work. We've got the spring there. And we've got the lower spring holding the two shoes together there behind the bracket. And of course, I haven't got the parking brake on here. I learned the hard way to put it on first. You can put it on second if you want to, but it is much easier to put it on first. Just be very aware with the parking brake cable that it does go through its little latch like this one is here. If it doesn't, it'll rub on the back of that wheel hub and you'll hear it. So just make sure it goes through there. I just had to push mine in with, I put a cable tie around it and pulled it down and then pushed it into the little clamp there. So that's, make sure that's in its right spot. We go ahead and put the drum back on. Okay, this is the other side all done. We've got the clips in holding the brake shoes. We've got our adjuster backed off a little bit more than it was when they were worn. We've got our auto adjuster here with the spring is now attached. The bottom spring is in. The park brake is in and it is through its clip so it doesn't rub on the back of the axle. And we have the center spring in here, the big spring. We have the small loop on the park brake side and the big loop on this side here so it doesn't interfere with the park brake. There is a big loop and a small loop. I've got the big loop on this side here and the small one there. Okay, that's all assembled, ready to put the drum back on. They do mention a maximum diameter in here. If you've got a big wear lip and you're worried about it, it's worth measuring and you can replace them fairly cheaply. I'm not too bothered. I think it'll go on just fine. It doesn't look like it's got any cracks or any issues. I'm going to stick it back on and we are going to put a little bit of anti-seize between here and here so we can get it off next time. Okay, anti-seize is on. Let's just drop this. Beautiful. Now we can put the wheel on to hold everything up, or we can just put the nuts on and we can give it a turn and just slowly adjust from the back just so we have a feel of where these brakes are at. You can see here with the drum off, if we come through that little inspection hole, you can turn it with a screwdriver. You can only turn it one way, which is of course to adjust them to be tighter. You never really want to loosen them off. And it goes a bit like that. We just keep adjusting until we feel it is right. Okay, that's adjusted. We've got the smallest amount of drag. We can hear it. Doesn't stop us turning the wheel. We'll see how we go. We'll do the other side. If we don't have much pedal feel and the parking brake is still quite a long throw, we may need to adjust them more. Just make sure we adjust them evenly. Let's do the next side. Okay, with that drum all reassembled, the hardest part of the job is getting the adjustment just right. We don't want to over adjust it because they will drag and overheat. We don't want to under adjust it because we'll have no brake pedal feel and the park brake will likely
not hold the vehicle or have far too much throw before it does hold the vehicle. In my experience, it's easier to under adjust it first. If everything feels a bit loose, a couple of clicks at a time until we get it right. Make sure we balance the left and right brakes. If we over adjust it and they get too hot and they drag and they overheat, they're very, very hard to adjust back the other way. We usually have to remove the drum and start again. So a little bit loose to start with. If things feel a bit loose, your pedal has a bit too much stroke and the park brake doesn't feel very strong or there's too much throw, then we can adjust it up from there. That's the easiest way to do it. They can be a little bit difficult. Once you get them right though, the brake should feel correct. The park brake should be very effective. Other than that, thank you very much for watching.